welcome you to the Legal Table. I am your host, Crystal Jamerson, and I'm the Community Engagement and Outreach Coordinator for Legal Services of Northwest Minnesota. The Legal Table was created to educate you on your rights and responsibilities, along with introduce you to community organizations that have resources to help you along the way. Today, we do have a special legal table where we're going to be talking about disasters in Minnesota. So a little bit different than the normal law topics that we talk about. So I'm really excited that we're able to have two special guests with us. So disaster education, it's really crucial because it helps individuals and communities understand their rights and protections before, during, after a crisis. So whether they're facing floods or fires or some type of extreme weather, knowing the legal steps to take can mean the difference between like recovery and some future hardships that they may have. It empowers some communities to access emergency aid, preserve housing, protect employment, and rebuilding lives with dignity. So legal education in times of disaster, it strengthens the resilience and ensures that no one is left behind in these face of uncertain times. Presently, we're trying to make sure that the people in the counties that we serve are aware of their options and resources available for its community members. So as you may know, Legal Services of Northwest Minnesota, we serve 22 counties. We have 3 offices in the area where we serve clients in navigating the justice system, and we provide services for low-income individuals with their civil legal needs, not criminal. Outside of providing full representation for a client, we have legal kiosks, which are really great in 87 locations, and our service area that provides assistance with virtual courts and legal documents. We have a justice bus, and which is a mobile clinic that allows us to go into the communities where transportation is limited to provide legal assistance. And then we also have self-help clinics to assist with the do-it-yourself type court forms. So we hope to bring you some more information on many different civil legal topics throughout the year. So make sure you continue to join us and pass the information along to coworkers and to clients. With that being said, let me introduce you to our guest today. And I hope I get this right. Kayla Nagelski from Legal Services of Northwest Minnesota, and then Lisa Gavin from Iowa Legal Aid. Really quick, just a little bit of housekeeping rules. Please make sure to put all of the questions in the chat and we'll get to them at the end of the presentation. Also, this is a quick hour-long meeting, so if you would like more information, each panelist will have their information listed at the end of the meeting or at the end of their presentation. This meeting will be available on the YouTube channel by the end of the week. So if you have any coworkers that were unable to make it, please make sure to check out the channel or spread the word on your social media about the channel. And I think those are all the house rules that we have. I'll try to respond to everybody in the chat as best as I can. So without further ado, I'm going to turn the mic over to Kayla, and you are good to go. I'm going to stop sharing my screen here. All right, take it away.
Perfect. I am just going to share my screen. So my name is Kayla Nagelski, and I am the project coordinator here at LS&M. And I am joined with our mentor legal aid with Iowa, with Lisa Gavin. And so first, we're going to talk a little bit about our program and how it started. We just recently started our disaster program in the summer of 2024, and so we're very new, and we've had a lot of help from Iowa Legal Aid. So I will let Lisa talk a little bit about their program. Oh, and we can't hear you, Lisa.
Okay.
There we go.
Yes. Good. You missed my introduction. So I am Lisa Gavin. I am the disaster relief coordinator from Iowa Legal Aid. So I respond to disasters that happen all around the state of Iowa. And I also serve as the Cedar Rapids Regional Office Managing Attorney. Um, and so I guess I wanted to talk to you. We've been doing disaster response since 2008 when we had pretty extreme flooding in the state of Iowa. And like everyone else who responds to their first disaster, we responded after the event. And so, which means we were, about 20% of the city of Cedar Rapids flooded, and we responded within a couple of days after that. And I became in charge of our disaster response. And I wanted to tell you how I became in charge of our disaster response is because my house was also flooded in the disaster. So my boss said, you know the most of anyone about disaster now because you have been to FEMA as a registrant, as a distressed homeowner. And I was like, okay. And so then I became in charge of our response, and our disaster response to that lasted about until about 2012. There was just so many disaster cases, so many people had needs. um we have determined, and we did not come up with this. This came from Oklahoma Legal Services, but the woman said, you give me a disaster victim or a disaster survivor, and I will give you a multitude of legal problems that they have. They just don't know them yet. And so that is the thing that is so important in disaster recovery is there are so many legal issues. And so we got a grant in 2015 to create a model of disaster recovery that could be utilized by legal aid programs around the country. And so we did develop a plan. We were able to test it out in our first disaster subsequent in 2016, and then again in 2018 with several disasters. And then we have been beset with disasters since 2020, and I will talk about them later. But we have constantly worked to improve our plan. We have taken suggestions and incorporations from other states, and I think it is a work in progress, but we are willing to share our plan with anyone who wants to, start their own disaster response. And so when Minnesota started their disaster response in 2024, they reached out to us to have us kind of share our plan with them and kind of walk them through and offer some training that we have learned in our subsequent disasters. So that's what I will say right now.
Yeah, and this, legal aid fills such a gap that we don't think about in disasters. Our clients that we serve often are the most disproportionately impacted people in disasters. And so with Iowa's great leadership and helping us navigate this, we've been really able to hit some of those milestones before a disaster happens. And so talking about some of the types of disasters and the kind of the differences between them are, there's major disasters, which are federally declared. These are your big ones that we think of, like hurricanes and wildfires and big floods. We often hit a federally declared disaster when the state can no longer fill the need that comes from those. And those are opened up into individual assistance programs. And that's when you start seeing FEMA and disaster recovery centers and things of that nature. But in Minnesota here, we don't often see a ton of federally declared disasters. And so that's when we start seeing more state declared disasters or even just local incidents. We've had Fargo floods and we've had the Minneapolis bridge collapse is a good example, and even just wildfires and house fires and even cyber attacks, and obviously our pandemic. But in the middle there, I have two examples of federally declared disasters in our region. One of those was the Fargo flood of 2009, and then more recently was the southern Minnesota floods down in over the summer. And so these are a few of the examples that Minnesota kind of disasters experienced. We don't get hurricanes, but we have small tornadoes that may not even hit a state threshold. And so that's where legal aid comes in, especially up here in a more rural area. We really want to be able to hit those clients that maybe aren't getting the attention in the news or people aren't hearing about them. But these issues exist from small disasters all the way to big disasters. And so here is a timeline of a lot of different civil legal issues that can appear after disaster. They can go on from a week after the disaster all the way to years after the disaster. And I think Lisa will have a lot of good insight on her experiences with the timeline of these issues.
Yeah, and it is funny because it seems like no matter what disaster it is, from a tornado or a derecho, all the way to COVID and a building collapse, these disaster issues seem to kind of follow the same trajectory. And so I just wanted to talk about what we kind of see initially after a disaster. This is right after people are recovering. I always say Iowa Legal Aid is not the emergency responders. We are not there saving lives. We're not there helping people immediately after a disaster to get connected, to do those things. That is where the emergency management and people like that are. But we come in kind of secondary. And so, what we help people with is the problems that affect them immediately. One of the problems that affects people immediately is housing. Are they able to return to their house? If they're not, to get them stable housing. Some of the things that come in is, and I'm going to just talk about Iowa, and I'll let Kayla kind of summarize Minnesota law. But in Iowa, people are able to terminate their lease if a disaster happens and they cannot return to the residence. They are able within 14 days to send a letter to the landlord that states that, and to request back their prepaid rent and their deposit. And the landlord then has 30 days to return it to them. It's not the greatest because the people need the money now, but it is what Iowa law allows. There are some issues, and there comes with repair issues right away, because one thing about a disaster is that it gets a lot of good contractors and bad contractors in there, because people sometimes have money right away from either FEMA or their insurance company to make repairs. And there are a lot of times people that aren't used to having that much money, and it makes them kind of crazy, and they want to get back into their house as soon as possible. So sometimes they are more susceptible to the scam artists, of contractors and things like that. And there's also FEMA. Sometimes there's FEMA or state assistance that people are applying for. And so it's just letting people know that these exist so that they can make their applications. Sometimes it's people need to file insurance claims and have the insurance adjusters come out and things like that. Sometimes people have lost documents that they need. They've lost their birth certificate, driver's license, social security cards, deeds to their house, things like that. And they need help getting those documents replaced so they can go on to get assistance. Um, and there can be unemployment, public benefits, there may be wage theft, there may be issues to keep their income coming in during the time that they're not able to work, and making sure that they get replacement for benefits that are lost. So those are some of the issues that come up immediately after the disaster. Then what we call more medium level disaster legal issues. These are when people need help with, they may need help with FEMA appeals. There may be issues with the contractor doing the work, or the contractor's been paid and done some of the work, but not others. Lots and lots of contractor issues can come up. There may be price gouging. They may have insurance issues with their insurance, getting those, getting their claims processed correctly. There may be issues with, some family law, a lot of stress involved in the family. It can create some domestic violence issues. It can lead to divorce or parties separating. There may need to be powers of attorney if other people are taking care of your children while you're going through this. There may be some of your Section 8 to use your portability, to use your certificate somewhere else if there's not any current housing in the town you live in. There may be issues with your mortgage. You may not be able to pay the mortgage while you're also paying for a temporary place to live. So there may be issues with foreclosures. Again, there may be issues with landlord tenant, with landlords charging excessive rent, raising the prices, not wanting to, um, you know, not wanting to rent to you to the same price they were before the disaster, because now there's less housing and people are more desperate and they can get more money. And this kind of goes into some of our long-term issues, and these can go on for years. And these are the actual foreclosure cases that can happen because people were not able to pay the mortgage on a house that was damaged. Insurance disputes can go on for a long time, especially if people need to complain to the Department of Insurance, or they need to bring a lawsuit against their insurance company to get money back. And I will say that now, in disasters, sometimes there is more fighting with the insurance companies because the insurance companies are being hit all over the country with disasters. and they feel like they can't afford to pay all these claims. And so it just takes a lot longer. In the 2020 derecho incident in Cedar Rapids was kind of one of the first um, nationwide big disasters in the pandemic, and they were working out how to do that. I think now they don't have enough staff. They It just seems to take forever, and I don't think that's going to change. We also saw a lot of people whose insurance companies dropped them because they made a claim, and then trying to get new insurance to cover them can be difficult. So there is just lots of issues with insurance. Um, and there's still issues with FEMA long term. People are still appealing, having issues showing their claim for damages, showing what got paid from insurance, what insurance didn't pay. Sometimes the difference between FEMA claims and insurance claims can have, both fighting whichever, and people are getting nothing. And FEMA then can do up to 3 years after the disaster, can come in and say a recoupment process to say, we determine that you received benefits that you weren't entitled to. We would like you to pay them back. These are not to be confused with FEMA fraud cases. These are cases where the person did nothing wrong. They applied for benefits. They did not lie. I mean, they did not do anything fraudulent or anything negative, and FEMA determined that they were eligible and paid them some benefits. And then a year or two later, FEMA kind of changes their mind and says, oh, maybe we shouldn't have given benefits in that case. So we've determined that we have given you benefits wrongly, and so we want them back. So and the people are devastated because they have used the FEMA money to repair their house and have gone on, to recover, and then they get a letter from FEMA that starts it all over again. There's still landlord tenant issues. There's improperly repaired houses or houses not repaired at all that are being put out for rent. And there's mold issues. There's disaster related issues that are still ongoing. There can be some disaster tax issues. Still insurance, people are more likely to file for bankruptcy after a disaster. There can be issues with whether or not they got repairs made. It can lead to city inspections and nuisance claims, and just the stress of the disaster can cause family law problems for years after the disaster. This is just kind of a simple timeline of some of the legal issues that we see for many years after the disaster.
Yeah, and to summarize, a lot of these issues are happening on a day-to-day basis. For attorneys, they're dealing with these civil legal issues minus the FEMA things every day. But in a disaster, these are all exasperated and they're put on a very complicated timeline, right? And so attorneys and the clients have to navigate this process between state resources, federal resources, and their own knowledge of the processes. And so a lot of these issues can also lead to cascading issues in a disaster. So a normal housing issue in a disaster can spiral very quickly into several leading disasters. And that's another thing that we are really trying to push and help people recognize the issues in a disaster. And so we wanted to talk a little bit about the different disasters and responses that Iowa and LS&M have been able to do through the disaster legal program. And we also want to address quickly that the government and the changing environment within the federal government may alter some of these FEMA applications or processes or even aid programs. So that's another thing to keep in mind, and we are keeping track of and trying to watch.
Okay. And so I won't spend a lot of time on Iowa disaster response, but I will tell you, I never really thought about disaster. I just went along my life. I was a VAWA attorney. I was happy doing divorces, protection orders, all of that. Then June 11th, 2008 happened, and we had the Cedar River flooded in Cedar Rapids, and there was tons of flooding all over the state. But I focused on the Cedar Rapids disaster, and we responded to that. And then there was in 2016, the Cedar Rapids River flooded again. And then in 2018, we had a tornado in Marshalltown. Uh, it was a fairly strong tornado. It was a level 3, and but we did not have FEMA declared. And so we responded to that for about a year. They had a great community grant that funded us to come and respond. We were out there several days a week, and then in the end, out there one day a week. And I think a lot of people helped and got help during that time, but it was just, it was a lot. And then there was flooding in Des Moines, which was unfortunately not caused by river flooding, but caused because Des Moines in certain parts of the city got about 9 inches of rain in about 3 hours, and it overwhelmed the system, the drainage system. And so the areas that flooded were not people that were used to getting flooded. It was not people that had flood insurance. It was not anything. And there was limited response to what we could do to the people because there was no FEMA. It was not a FEMA declared disaster, and it was from flooding, but the people did not have flood insurance. And so it was talking through people on what they could do to repair their homes and things like that without the resources that were available. So that was a really sad one. We have since then in 2020, we had the derecho go through. It went through 13 counties in Iowa. I live in Cedar Rapids. For some reason, Cedar Rapids, which is right in the middle of the state, I do not know why the storm was the worst in Cedar Rapids. The storm lasted about an hour. We had wind gusts up to 140 miles per hour, which I am just saying, when I was doing it, I knew I should be in the basement, but I just couldn't. And I was like watching out my window from the stairway, and it was just shocking, just, I mean, and then I saw my neighbor's trampoline fly over our house and go bouncing down the street, and I was like, oh my God. And there was trees falling down in my neighborhood. There was cars stuck in the road. I mean, it took Cedar Rapids a couple of days to respond because there was no electricity, there was no cell phone service. There was no way in and out of your streets because there was 60% of Cedar Rapids trees came down, and it was crazy. And we are still doing cases from the derecho. Since then, we had another series of derecho events that happened in December of 2021, which was a nutty day. It was like 70 degrees in the middle of December, and we that day had more tornadoes than any day in Iowa has ever had before. But most of this happened in rural areas, so we did not have the levels of damage that we did from the 2020 derecho, which hit Des Moines, Cedar Rapids, and Davenport pretty bad. We've also had COVID-19 we treated as a disaster, and we activated our disaster response team to that. There has been a building collapse in Davenport that killed several people and displaced thousands of people for a time. Um, then there's been isolated flooding, isolated tornadoes. There was a school shooting in January 2024, which we responded to. We were worried that with school not being in session, parents wouldn't be able to work, and especially low income parents would then get in trouble with paying the rent for the next month, that there would be more evictions, more people losing their housing just because of school not being in session. And then in the summer of 2024, we had a string of tornadoes in Council Bluffs and in out by Des Moines, and we had severe flooding in northwest Iowa that we are still responding to. So that is just kind of what we have changed is disaster response. I used to think was always some kind of natural event. Now I know it is really just an emergency response because the building collapse, um, school shootings, it includes all of those things, both human and nature caused.
Yeah. And I think that highlights the overlap between our clients' recovery along with our own recovery and having a plan in place to deal with both of ours. So I wanted to talk a little bit about LS&M's first disaster response. You know, we had a 12-unit apartment complex fire out in February that we were able to respond to. We had about 3 intakes. It happened during the coldest week of the winter. And unfortunately, every single tenant had to be evicted, and they actually demolished it. But LS&M was able to join into their community resource fairs and help the clients that had left or been displaced from their apartments during this fire, and helping them with housing and helping them with relocation was really a way that our program was able to help with this smaller disaster in a small county. And so this just shows that we have only been a program for less than a year, and we've been able to respond quickly and efficiently to our smaller, low attention disasters. And then we wanted to talk a little bit about how we can prepare ourselves legally before a disaster strikes. And I'll let Lisa hit that a little bit, and then I'll summarize it up.
What I will do is just summarize kind of what a legal aid program can that allows us to do trainings to populations over age 60 and to prepare them for disasters. And so what we have done is a series um, of speaking events for the
Lisa, you're frozen a little bit.
It looks like we may have where our presenter is frozen. So, okay, so yeah, looks like it is coming for a couple of people. Kayla or Lisa, Lisa, if you can hear us, feel free. Oh, it
Yep,
looks
and
like,
you're muted right now, Lisa.
let's see.
There we go. You all
Okay.
there, Lisa?
Yes, did just I leave or did everybody?
It was
Just
just you that was frozen.
Oh, shoot. I'm sorry. And so we present, I guess, to on all of our presentations now, we do kind of a 5 to 10 minute end of the presentation on legal needs in a disaster and to help people prepare. And so I will let you talk about that and then I can add anything at the end.
Yeah. So a few ways that we try and tell our community and even providers to prepare for a disaster, just basically is have an emergency preparedness plan. Keep track of what medications you may need, what kind of contact or emergency contacts you have, and have a family or an organization reunification plan. It can make all the difference in those like quick, those moments after a disaster when things are very crazy. Staying informed and subscribing to your local emergency response program. Around here it's Everbridge, and then they send out notifications when there are events happening in your region, so they are in your area because it is location based. And then for the more legal sides is knowing what kind of insurance that you have and the coverage and being able to interpret it before something happens. If you're in a floodplain, do you have flood insurance? Is that something that's feasible for you and your family or organization? And then knowing when these uh, these insurance programs, when they're able to help you and how they are able to help you. Because a lot of our programs, whether federally or state, will not cover things that are already covered by insurance. So understanding your own plan can really help with the recovery process. And then knowing what benefits are out there after a disaster. For the state of Minnesota, there's disaster SNAP, there's disaster unemployment benefits, there's temporary housing, there's repair assistance. And so doing your own research beforehand and knowing what programs you're able to apply to after a disaster can also help with that recovery process move it along more smooth. And then, as Lisa was saying, in a lot of the issues after a natural disaster where there are damages, is being aware of the different types of consumer scams that can appear, knowing that door to door contractors may or may not be licensed, that there's always going to be a risk of incomplete work, and just being able to call legal aid to verify licenses and their past records of um, contracting, and making sure that you are not being pressured into things by door-to-door insurance salesmen or door-to-door contractors. There's a lot of people that take advantage of those after a disaster, and that's just the harsh reality that we have to try and prepare ourselves for. But legal aid can be a really good resource in vetting these people and being very cognizant of where your documents are that are important. So your deeds, your social security cards, your passports, your birth certificates, any name changing certificates that you have, making sure that they're, where they are, they're kept in a safe place. not everybody has access to fire safe boxes, but that's usually what we recommend is a fireproof box. But even putting your documents in Ziploc bags can make a big difference. And being able to know where they are, and if you need them, grab them, because having your documents throughout the recovery process can make it go a lot better. While legal aid can help navigate the processes of recovering your documents, it's a good preparedness step and a mitigation step to know where they are. And if you don't have them, being able to get those before a disaster hits, because there's going to be an influx for all government organizations and even community organizations after a disaster. And it's going to take a lot longer for you to get these things in order. And having the best plan forward for the easiest recovery is always what we aim for. But legal aid is absolutely here to help navigate these very complex processes. But yeah, being prepared is definitely a very important step too, because nobody wants to think about a disaster, right? Everybody is dealing with their own daily lives, but setting aside time to have these conversations with your family or your employees can really make a big difference in the end, because it's not if a disaster happens, it's when.
I would just like to reiterate that on the insurance issue. A lot of homeowners have insurance because they have a mortgage and their mortgage company requires them to have insurance. What I have seen is a lot of lower income, especially older people who own their home free and clear and make the decision that they can't afford homeowners insurance, and so they go without. And that is a real problem in the event of a disaster that happens later that can leave them with no coverage. And if it's not a FEMA level disaster, that can lead them with very limited to no benefits to recover. The other thing I would like to say is we talk a lot to our clients about the need to have renters insurance. A lot of renters assume that their landlord has an insurance policy that is going to cover them. It does not. The insurance that the landlord has will replace the building, make repairs to the building. It will not replace the items that belong to the tenants. And so, what I do like to stress to tenants is that the insurance policy can be a lot cheaper than any other policy, and sometimes they can get the policy for probably $10 to $25 a month, which I know seems like a lot, but when you are replacing everything, especially in an apartment fire or a tornado, that it can really make a big difference in your recovery. But there is not insurance for you if you don't get it yourself. So I just want to make sure that people understand that now when they're not in a disaster, rather than finding out later when they are in a disaster.
Absolutely. And that wraps up our presentation. There's our contact information. And is there any questions that anybody has or comments after the presentation?
Well, first off, I definitely want to say thank you so much to Lisa and Kayla for presenting today. All the information that you presented was amazing because I don't think people understand the gravity of what a person goes through during a disaster. If anyone does have any questions and wants to get on really quick and ask a question, we can. Otherwise, there are a couple of questions that came through on our social media channels that I can definitely put out there and make sure that we get those answers for.
Absolutely.
All right. We'll go ahead and we'll just start with the general question because, obviously, as Lisa was talking, she is a disaster survivor. So there was one big question that just I personally had is this, okay, so being a disaster attorney is one thing, but actually being in it and having that disaster happen, how do you feel? I know this is not a legal topic, but just as a survivor, so our community organizers understand what this person is truly going through mentally when they're trying to know that their whole world just got flipped upside down.
I will say, I was a terrible disaster victim because all of my legal knowledge, all of my legal training, all of my preparation totally left my mind. And I became fixated on one thing, getting home, getting my house repaired so I could live in it again. And I made all of the same mistakes that I warn people about. I I mean, if someone had come up to me that day and said, I can repair your home and have it back in a week, I would have been like, here's all of my money, fix it. And so I think what helps me now is I understand maybe in a way I didn't before the disaster happened to me, how you lose your mind and you want to, all you can think about is getting home and being repaired and pretending it never happened. And so I try to tell people don't be Lisa in a disaster. I always say, okay, don't be me. Don't be me. Be smarter than me and think about what think about this. This is going to take a little bit more time. And the more you think about it, the better you investigate the people that are making repairs for you, the better you are looking at the contractor, the better you are doing this. Yes, it takes more time. Yes, it means that you might have to wait before you can move into your house again, but you will be so much better in the long term. So so I think it does help when I just tell people, I mean, in the beginning, I say, I don't know what you're going through, but I kind of know because I went through the 2008 flood. It is kind of funny because then I think the people are like, "Oh, you get it. Okay, here's what my things are." And I just tell people, I did so many dumb things. And if I can help prevent you from doing one dumb thing on this, then I feel like I have done so much for you.
No, that is awesome because I think that not everybody is understanding when you are in it, you are in it. And
Mhm.
so some of those preventative things that you need, sometimes you're not even thinking about those. But one thing that came to my mind is, especially with Kayla, I believe, Kayla, I think you just did a presentation with Dancing Sky about the
Mhm.
file. And when it comes to like preventative measures to be able to make sure that maybe all you have to do is grab one thing or you know that all of your stuff is together, can you kind of describe what the file would mean to somebody in a disaster situation, like having that? And can you describe what the file is? Maybe it'll give people an understanding of, how they can help their community members if they had that.
Yeah, so the file is basically a little folder that gives information about, or it lists all of these important documents that you may have, or what maybe, it's aimed for seniors. So it's a lot of houses, like where are your assets, what are your bank accounts, what is your power of attorneys? It has basically all your information, and it doesn't necessarily all need to be in the same place, but it's used to identify where these things are stored or who has them and where these things are. And so it can be a really helpful tool to have that in a more available location in before a disaster, say, just so you can identify where these things are. It's if you have a deed to your house, it's probably a good thing to know where that is and you can grab it, or your identification documents, knowing where they are, because when a disaster happens, as Lisa was saying, things can get really crazy really quickly, and just having one less thing to worry about, you know, you're not having to go through bins and files in your house or reach out to people who may be dealing with their own recovery or life. And you know, having a document that shows all these things in the case of a disaster can be so unbelievably helpful. And just in general, you know, knowing where these things are and having almost a one document that shows you where they are, what are your assets, who's in charge of your decisions, if that's something that you've given up or something that you've arranged. And yeah, just making sure all your legal T's and I's are crossed and dotted before something happens can make the process go a lot quicker.
That's perfect. So when you come to like disaster preparedness, I know a lot of organizations, you know, they're dealing with some organizations that are in crisis right now, maybe some that are in low income situations where they're vulnerable adults. How can a community organization help their clients to become prepared, disaster prepared? Like, is there a good website that they could be able to look at and surf that will give them maybe some disaster kits?
Yeah,
Can you go
absolutely. There, one I always recommend is FEMA's ready.org or ready.gov. It has preparedness tips for anything and everything you can think of. I mean, they have, um, you know, disaster recovery with an animal if you get displaced, how to get shelters that have animals, or how to have kits ready for you and your family, and how to so they have these community or not community family communication plans that you can keep in your wallet, and they have a ton of resources for you to just, it's fun to look through, and how can you be aware of the hazards in your area and prepare for those, what kind of warning systems exist, what people to listen to, and what organizations are available in your area. That would always be a good one for preparedness. And then for legal information, ladrc.org is a really great resource that shows disasters that are currently happening, as well as diving really deep into certain issues. And that website is both for clients as well as legal professionals to help navigate the legal processes after a disaster.
That's perfect. I think a lot of community organizations, you know, they want to go online and try to help somebody or try to figure out what resources they have in their pocket, but it's really good to know something that's updated and that you guys use in your own day to day when you're meeting with organizations. One other thing that, you know, kind of came to mind, especially when you're talking about insurance companies, Lisa, I used to be an insurance agent for a long time. So I'm very used to when some type of disaster strikes, especially like a hailstorm or something, and people are coming in and they're frantic and they want these things fixed. And if we're like, oh, you know what? I'm sorry, that's not in your policy. We don't cover that. And they're like, are you kidding me? I've been paying $200, $500 a month and that you're not going to cover this. Um, is there anything that people should be looking for? Should they maybe go over their policies with their insurance agent? Is there anything in particular that people should, you know, make sure that they have? Especially because I know a lot of insurance companies are pulling out of some states because of certain disasters. But um, is there anything particular that you know of that people should look for, or do you think they should review their policies like once a year?
I think people should review their policies so that they know what is and what is not covered. And one of the things they should look at is whether they have full replacement insurance or whether they have cash value insurance because that makes a huge difference in the amount and the amount that they're going to get back after a disaster. Because say like the derecho came through and it damaged and you need a roof. If you have full replacement insurance, then your insurance company should pay to replace the roof minus any deductible that you owe, which for most people is about $1,000. It can be as low as 500 to as much as 2,500. It depends what kind of policy you have and how much you're willing to pay. You know, the lower the deductible, the more you're going to pay per month for insurance. Um, and but if you have cash value insurance, you just need to know that this is cheaper insurance. It will cost you less, but it will also give you less benefits because they will look at your roof. And if they say, okay, your roof is estimated to last 20 years, and your roof is 10 years old, they will figure out how much it's going to cost to replace the roof. And then they will give you basically half of that because they will give you the cash value of what your a 10-year-old roof is. The problem with that is that you can't then go out and buy a 10-year-old roof. You have to buy a new roof or pay to have a new roof put on, but you only have the proceeds from your 10-year-old roof, if you know what I mean. So that is just something to think about when you're getting your policy, because a lot of times people will go and look at what the how much it's going to cost them. And so those cash value ones are cheaper, which means the premiums are cheaper, but they will cover less things or give you less value of the things that they cover. And I think what happens is a lot of people don't really think about their insurance policy until something happens, and then they discover that that's what they have. And
Okay.
and so that can create problems. So I think if you review your policy, and if you don't understand it, to review it with someone who does, okay? So they can explain it to you. That can be a lawyer, that can be your insurance agent, just so you know what your insurance policy covers and doesn't cover. You really want to know that beforehand so you can make decisions on what you want to pay or not pay.
That's perfect. Thank you, Lisa. And we did have a question that popped up in the chat from Cheryl. Two things. So one, very important, and thank you, Cheryl. Lawhelpmn.org is something that we normally send a lot of clients to. So if you do have a civil legal question, that you're able to go on there and navigate to find your answers. They have FAQs, videos, and such. It's an amazing site. They also have a page directly for disaster resources. And the link is in the chat. So thank you so much for that, Cheryl. Also, she had put in there, even with replacement value insurance, I think that customers need to purchase items and then can be reimbursed. Could an insurance person confirm that? One thing that I will say is that there are a lot of insurance and if there's an insurance person in the group, feel free to chime in, but I just want to be very quickly. Anytime you have any questions about how your insurance will either pay out, please make sure to talk to your independent insurance representative because some insurance providers, they'll do the whole claim process. They'll contact the contractors. They'll give the checks directly out. And some of them you have to get the contractor's bid, you have to pay, and then you get reimbursed. And it's all depending on how your policy is set up and sometimes the insurance companies. But definitely talk to your insurance provider. I want to try to make sure that I'm respectful of your time. So I apologize. Very, very good questions from everybody. I want to say a huge thank you. And actually, I'm going to share the screen really quick. If you're able to unshare, Kayla, that would be great.
Yep.
Okay. I wanted to quickly and again thank our guests for coming out today. Truly appreciate everybody being able to let us know about disasters in Minnesota. Feel free to join us in every other month for the legal table while we'll give you some valuable information. If you have any questions or would like to be a presenter, or if you just want to be able to have some presentations given to your organization, feel free to contact me at cjamerson@lsnmlaw.org or give me a call at 218-422-7034. I want to thank all of our guests one more time. And if you have any further questions, feel free to reach out. Thank you guys so much for attending today, and you guys have a wonderful afternoon.